In 1985, Steve Jobs was fired from the company he created. He lost everything: his title, his team, his vision, his identity. Most people would have given up. Most people would have called it over. But Steve Jobs did something that almost nobody talks about. And that one decision, made in his darkest moment, is the reason Apple became the most valuable company in human history. Today we are going to talk about that decision and four other lessons from Steve Jobs that will completely change the way you think about money, success, and building a life that actually matters. Welcome back to Million Mindset, the channel where we break down the psychology of wealth, success, and the mindset that separates ordinary people from extraordinary ones. Steve Jobs is one of the most studied people in modern history, but most videos about him focus on his products: the iPhone, the Mac, the iPod. Today we are going different. We are going deeper. We are talking about the 5 lessons from his life that nobody teaches in school. Lessons about failure, obsession, money, and what it really means to build something that lasts. Let's get into it. Lesson number 1: love what you do or quit. This sounds simple, but most people completely misunderstand what Steve Jobs meant by this. He was not saying follow your passion and money will come. That is terrible advice, and Jobs knew it. What he was actually saying is this: the only way to do great work is to truly care about what you are building. Because building something great is incredibly hard. It takes years. It takes sacrifice. It takes failing over and over again. And if you do not genuinely love what you are working on, you will quit the moment it gets difficult. And it always gets difficult. Jobs spent years in his garage building computers that almost nobody wanted to buy. He worked 18-hour days. He obsessed over details that most people thought were completely irrelevant, like the font on a computer screen. He did not do that for money. He did it because he genuinely could not imagine doing anything else. The lesson is not to follow your passion. The lesson is to find something you care about so deeply that failure cannot stop you. That is a completely different thing. Lesson number 2: your biggest failure might be your greatest gift. In 1985, the Apple board of directors voted to remove Steve Jobs from the company he founded at age 21. Jobs himself said, and I am paraphrasing here, that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to him. Why? Because it freed him. After leaving Apple, Jobs started a new company called Next. He also bought a small animation studio that was struggling. You might know it as Pixar. Pixar went on to create Toy Story, the first fully computer-animated feature film in history, and became one of the most successful studios in Hollywood. And next, Apple bought it in 1997 for $429 million, and that purchase brought Steve Jobs back to Apple, where he then created the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad. None of that happens without the failure of 1985. The lesson: when something falls apart in your life, a job, a relationship, a business, your brain tells you it is over. But sometimes what feels like an ending is actually a redirection towards something much bigger than you could have planned. Lesson number 3: simplicity is more powerful than complexity. One of Steve Jobs' most famous obsessions was simplicity. While every other tech company in the world was adding more features, more buttons, more complexity, Jobs was doing the opposite. He was removing things. The original iPhone had no copy and paste, no MMS, no third-party apps. Competitors laughed at it. But Jobs understood something most people miss. Simplicity is not about having less. It is about having exactly what matters and nothing else. This applies directly to how you build wealth. Most people make their financial life incredibly complicated. 10 different investments, 5 different savings accounts, complex strategies they read about online. The people who actually build wealth do the opposite. They keep it simple. They earn more than they spend. They invest the difference consistently. They repeat that for years. Warren Buffett, the greatest investor in history, has said his strategy is so simple it could fit on a napkin, and he is worth over $100 billion. Simplicity is not stupidity. Simplicity is mastery. Lesson number 4. You cannot connect the dots looking forward, only backwards. This comes from Steve Jobs' famous Stanford commencement speech in 2005, one of the most watched speeches in YouTube history. Jobs dropped out of college after just 6 months, but he stuck around campus for 18 months afterwards, sleeping on floors, returning Coke bottles for food money, and sitting in on classes that interested him. One of those classes was calligraphy, beautiful handwriting, completely useless by any practical measure. 10 years later, when Jobs was designing the first Macintosh computer, that calligraphy class became the inspiration for the Mac's beautiful typography. Multiple fonts, proportional spacing, things no other computer had at the time. If Jobs had not dropped into that random class, the Mac might have looked completely different, and the entire history of personal computing might have changed. The lesson? Do not stress about whether every decision you make today makes sense right now. Pursue things that genuinely interest you. Learn everything you can. Trust that at some point in the future, the dots will connect. Your experiences are never wasted. They are just waiting to become useful. Lesson number 5. Remember that you are going to die. This sounds dark, but hear me out, because this was the most important mindset that Steve Jobs ever shared. Every morning, Jobs would look in the mirror and ask himself one question. If today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? If the answer was no too many days in a row, he knew something needed to change. Most people spend their entire life building someone else's dream, working a job they hate, spending money on things that do not make them happy, waiting for a perfect moment that never comes. Jobs was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2003. He died in 2011 at just 56 years old. In his Stanford speech, he said, "Death is very likely the single best invention of life. It clears out the old to make way for the new." Remembering that your time is limited is not depressing. It is liberating. It removes the fear of failure. It removes the need for approval. It strips away everything that does not actually matter. You have one life, one shot at building something meaningful. Do not waste it living someone else's version of success. Steve Jobs was not perfect. He was famously difficult to work with. He made serious mistakes as a leader and as a father, but the way he thought about work, failure, simplicity, and time, those lessons are genuinely timeless. So here is your challenge this week. Pick one of these 5 lessons and apply it to your own life right now. Are you working on something you genuinely care about? Are you overcomplicating your financial life? Are you letting a past failure define your future? If this video gave you a new way to think about success, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe to Million Mindset, because next video we are breaking down the hidden lessons from one of the most powerful books ever written about money and the human mind. I will see you then.